I think there are beginning to be some rumblings and questions regarding his mental acuity and his cognitive abilities, especially in Latrobe, Pennsylvania yesterday at the rally. He began talking about Arnold Palmer, the golfer. He was talking about him in the shower. I mean, the man just went right off the rails on that. And so it begins to be a question. And when we saw the interview with Kamala Harris on Fox News, Brett Baer asked her about Joe Biden's mental acuity and his cognitive decline. And the truth of the matter is that he's not the one running for president right now, and the questions need to be directed to her as her candidacy to run for president. But the press is not asking the same questions of Donald Trump.
With just 16 days to go until the US election, and last night both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris were at rallies in swing states last night to drum up support. The vice president and Democratic nominee Harris had the singer Lizzo join her on stage in Michigan.
They say if Kamala wins, then the whole country will be like Detroit. Okay? Proud like Detroit. Resilient like Detroit. We're talking about the same Detroit that innovated the auto industry and the music industry. So put some respect on Detroit's name.
Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump took a slightly different tone and aimed it directly at his rival.
So you have to tell Kamala Harris that you've had enough, that you just can't take it anymore. We can't stand you. You're a vice president. The worst. You're the worst vice president. Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired. Get out of here.
Now, Mary Anna Mancuso is a political commentator and former Republican strategist and joins us now. Mary, good afternoon. Thanks for giving us your time.
Good afternoon, Alexis. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Quite a difference in styles, perhaps, but a lot of criticism has been thrown at Kamala Harris for not doing enough interviews. She did do Fox News this week. Has she been doing enough, do you think, to win those leftover undecided votes?
Yeah, look, right now, the name of the game, it's interesting. If you watch Kamala Harris and you watch Donald Trump, they're doing things that you're not usually doing in the final weeks of a campaign. They're crossing over to go to the other side to try to peel away votes. We had Donald Trump at a Univision town hall this week. Kamala Harris, as you mentioned, on Fox News. It's really interesting, and you can tell that this race is going to be extremely, extremely close.
A lot of people have been commenting on certain things that Donald Trump has been saying in some of these interviews. Now, look, some people are Trump fans, some people are not Trump fans, but is there a genuine question, just like there was when the suitability of Joe Biden was being discussed, of whether or not he was suitable health-wise and mentally to take on the nomination? Can the same question be asked of Donald Trump? Some of the things that he says are inaccurate, plain wrong. Sometimes he looks confused or lost. Is there enough scrutiny going into actually whether Donald Trump himself is fit for office?
I think that's a very fair question. I don't think there is. I think there are beginning to be some rumblings and questions regarding his mental acuity and his cognitive abilities, especially in Latrobe, Pennsylvania yesterday at the rally. He began talking about Arnold Palmer, the golfer. He was talking about him in the shower. I mean, the man just went right off the rails on that. And so it begins to be a question. And when we saw the interview with Kamala Harris on Fox News, Brett Baer asked her about Joe Biden's mental acuity and his cognitive decline. And the truth of the matter is that he's not the one running for president right now, and the questions need to be directed to her as her candidacy to run for president. But the press is not asking the same questions of Donald Trump, who is now the oldest candidate in the race, by the way.
But do you think that it was ever thus, in a way, with Donald Trump? Even in 2016, Donald Trump didn't follow auto-cue script. He would have his anecdotes and his stories, and many will say that's actually what his fans like about him. They think of him as one of them. He's not a politician. He's one of them. Is that still the attraction for Trump fans?
I'm sure that is definitely still the attraction for Trump fans. I think that what's important, though, is there's a stark difference between Donald Trump in 2016 as a presidential candidate, in 2020, and now 4 years later in 2024. You can tell just based on watching him, he's tired on the campaign trail. Staff is telling the press that he's exhausted. He's canceled some events. I mean, look, he's 78 years old. He's running for the highest office in the land. The question has to be asked if he's able to to complete the office and do the duties of the job of the presidency should he win in November? And people are not asking that question. And I think that when we have the option here in America and we're looking at these two candidates, the question becomes, do you want to move the country forward, or do you want to go back to 4 more years, possibly worse, of Donald Trump as the former president? We all remember what it looked like under Donald Trump.
Now, there's a fascinating piece in today's Sunday Times about the Republican voters who are backing Donald Trump. Now, we should say that even though you are a former Republican strategist, you are not. You're one of the Republicans that has come out for Kamala Harris. But before we get your reasons for supporting Kamala Harris, what can you tell us about the people who are coming out for Donald Trump? His base, it doesn't seem to have shrunk. If anything, it seems to have got bigger and attracting people from outside his traditional support. So the Hispanic vote, for example, is starting to come out for Donald Trump.
Yeah, Donald Trump's campaign is focusing on Latino voters, specifically male, the young male vote. And I think that's a really bold strategy for a campaign that has to win and wants nothing more than to win this election, because ultimately we know, historically speaking, the youth male vote doesn't turn out as strongly as the college educated female vote. And that is the section of the electorate that Kamala Harris's campaign is focusing on. Now, Donald Trump and JD Vance have doubled down on machismo, and that is why he's appealing to these young 30-something Latino males and being very strong and dominant. And that's why you have JD Vance on the campaign trail being extremely misogynistic at times. And it's really resonating. But will that actually turn out to a voter, and will people show up and vote based off of that? That has yet to be seen.
Mary Ann, in the minds of many people, there is that question of what happens the day after the election. We've got two people on the ticket, JD Vance and Donald Trump, who still refuse to accept the outcome of the last election. They've both, JD Vance has sort of kind of dodged questions. Donald Trump, there's no dodging there. He's just said that the election was stolen and that he really won. What happens after the election, if indeed it is a close race and it doesn't go Donald Trump's way? What happens to the US?
I think that's a really fair question. And I think a lot of people, experts, are asking the same questions over here. And what I will say is that I am fairly certain that we will not see an election night result on election night on November 5th. I think that unfortunately those days of election night calling happening on election night are gone. It's just, with so many people turning out to vote, we have so many people showing up to the polls to vote early, we have mail-in ballots, it's a lot. And I think that it's important that we get it right. And we have already seen Trump out there on the campaign trail sowing those seeds of doubt and making questions, and polling workers who also are in the camp with JD Vance and Donald Trump and believing that the 2020 election was stolen, who are now going to be going back and working the polls again and are talking and meeting across the country in battleground states. And so I think we have to really take a pause and make sure that we get this right. And we know that this race will be close. I mean, this is going to come down to probably like a cat's whisker, if I had to guess. And we have to be very diligent. But we know that in 2020, during the pandemic, America had the safest, most securest election we've ever had. And we will continue to do that again in 2024.
Okay. Mary Anna Mancuso, thank you so much for giving us your time. A political commentator and former Republican strategist who has come out for Kamala Harris.